Hey everybody, this is Craig Garver. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. And man, we have a really terrific guest today. I'm with a brilliant, a really cool guy, great artist, super successful, super hard working, great work ethic. And I'm excited to talk with Will Hoge today. A couple of quick announcements. First of all, I want to thank our mutual friend, Danny Baird, for connecting us. Dan, thank you. You're the best. Also, make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com/subscribe to subscribe to the audio and video. If you're already watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the bell down there, please. All righty. Will Hoge is an Americana artist from, I hate to categorize. This guy is, he is so passionate. I hate to say he's an Americana artist because this guy is rock, folk, country. He's just really powerful. But he's an artist from Nashville, Tennessee. If you're not familiar with him, he's a tremendous songwriter. And when you listen to his music, this is the first thing that came to my thought. And I went through 2 or 3 of his records. With every fiber of his being, man, this guy is laying it out on the table 110%. He is not holding anything back, both in his music and in his lyrics. In the early 2000s, he started touring around the South and independently released his first CD, which is called Live at the Exit Inn, his t-shirt. That's from 2000 when he was touring. Through constant touring with actually Danny Baird on guitar, he was able to release his first studio album, Carousel. Because of his constant touring, he developed a solid fan base, which has allowed him to release at this point 6, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will, 6 live records and 14 studio records, including his most recent album, Tiny Little Movies, which we'll talk about. It's a great record. Over the years, Will's opened for Midnight Oil, Shinedown, Need to Breathe, Mark Broussard, ZZ Top, Squeeze, Jason Isbell, Lisa Loeb, and Edwin McCain, Michelle Branch, and others. Bands that have opened for Will include Steel Train, The Trues, The Elms, Rose Hill Drive, Moses Mayfield, The Alternate Roots, Aslan, Katie Herzig, Missy Higgins, and The Civil Wars. Will recorded the opening theme song called You Make Me Happy for the CBS sitcom Still Standing. He's had other tracks of his used on major product commercials. He's also performed on the CBS early show as a musical guest. He received the CMA, it's Country Music Association nomination, an Academy of Country Music nomination, and a Grammy nomination for Country Song of the Year for Even If It Breaks Your Heart, which is his song that he wrote, which was recorded by the Eli Young Band. It was #1 on the country charts. Will, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks to Dana Baird for making this happen.
Oh, absolutely. You look like a college professor right there with all them certificates and stuff.
Yeah, well, the great thing is, the only thing is mine are the glasses. Those are all my wife's diplomas.
She said, I just read these over COVID. I'm just trying to catch it.
I've got to do a little graduate level work. Yeah, we have 4 college degrees in our house, all of which are my wife's. But I figured we divide everything half, so that means I have 2. Yes.
That's absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Hey, man, so you originally went to college at Western Kentucky, from what I understand, to study history because you wanted to become a history teacher and a basketball coach. Obviously, you didn't do that. What prompted the change of plans?
Well, I loved rock and roll and just music across the board real early on, just as a fan. And then I got a guitar my last year of high school and started playing. Then when I got to college, I joined my first real band. And pretty quickly, college just wasn't a good fit for me. I didn't, I had this grand idea that college was going to be this place that was going to promote all of this, free thought. And you were really going to go and, become your own person and learn to think and do things. And I did want to be a history teacher and a basketball coach. And really it was kind of like 13th grade. And I just didn't love it, man. And at the same time, I was falling out of love with school and completely in love with being in a band and trying to write songs and rehearsing and playing shows. And after my first year, I did okay my first year, but then by the second year I was done and failed out and was back in Nashville doing this full time.
Wow. What were you, when you first started playing music, same thing you're doing now, singing, playing a little guitar and writing songs?
Yeah. The first band, it was a band in Bowling Green, and the guys were all, I was 18, and these guys were all a little older. They were kind of in their late 20s, so just maybe 8 or 10 years older than me. And they were they were really pro. I mean, they really, you know, they cared about having good gear and sounding good and rehearsing. So it was a really cool learning experience for me because I was real new at it. But yeah, same thing. Just I was a really, really terrible guitar player at the time, and but they let me do it, and you know, and yeah, so I played rhythm guitar and sang, and you know, just trying to write songs that make people feel something.
Where did you have a wealth of, like, you got a lot to say. You have I mean, that's a massive catalog you have, and it's not easy to write all that music. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to have this real heady answer, you know, and tell you about all these great books that I've read that influenced me and all these things. I mean, and that, I mean, there's some of that, but the truth of it is I really, like I mentioned in that first question, I mean, I grew up, my father had been a musician in Nashville. My father and my uncle were in bands.
Okay.
Kind of that post-Beatlemania, you know, you saw the Beatles and everybody started a band. And they really lived that dream for a few years until they started having kids. And I inherited this record collection. You know, I say inherited, it's still my dad's, but I grew up with this perfectly alphabetized, pristine vinyl collection of my dad's. Everything from, you know, every great record from 1964 to 1978, multi-genres, all different kinds of things. And so I think that as much as anything, you know, that was a lot of it for me, because I saw Buck Owens and the Beatles and Aretha Franklin and Janis Joplin and Carole King and Bob Dylan.
You saw them in concert?
No, but I saw them all as the same thing. You know,
okay.
I feel like so many people, you grew up with this just sort of one thing. And I think that for me, I just always liked cool songs and cool stories. And why did this person make this record? And it's just never. So I think I've just always been trying to do as many of those things as I could. Man,
well, you're super successful at it as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
well, thanks.
Really
I feel real lucky.
Yeah. Okay. So you said these guys were out of Boulder?
Bowling Green.
Oh, Bowling Green. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what's really funny is Western Kentucky a music school?
No, it's not. And Bowling Green was an interesting town. You know, a few years before I was there, in the early mid '80s, you know, when REM and kind of all of these bands were hitting from the Southeast, Bowling Green was kind of on the cusp of, you know, being one of those cool college towns. And so it kind of went bust by the time I was there, but there was still some remnants of it still being, you know, it was close enough to Nashville. It's only 70 miles from Nashville.
Right.
So you still got a lot of guys and girls coming from Nashville or going to Nashville. So it was always kind of a cool little music town. It was a perfect place to get your feet wet for sure.
The reason I ask is because I when I was reading your bio, I was like, I don't think I've had someone else on the show from Western Kentucky. Well, then I got a guy coming on next week, and it starts off attended Western Kentucky. So I'm like, oh, I guess it's a music school I just didn't know about.
Now, who's the other person?
Hang on. How random is that, right?
That's pretty random.
I know. Let me see. I think it was Steve Mackey. Do you know him? Bass player?
Yeah, he could. Well, I was going to say Steve Gorman is the other one. The drummer.
Oh, no, it was Steve Gorman. That's right, because I'm reading his book because he's coming on the show. That's right. It was Gorman. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Gorman. No, Gorman is from up there. Gorman grew up about, I don't know, maybe an hour from Bowling Green, and then he went to Western before that. So.
That's what it was, right? Because I started reading his book this weekend. That's right, man. It's very random, isn't it, man? All of a sudden, musicians.
It's a small world, man. Yeah, it really is. That's
cool.
Great. He'll be a killer interview. That'll be fun.
Yeah, he's going to be funny. I'm looking forward to it. So you're with these guys in Bowling Green in your band. What was your first break that you'd say got you started in the music business?
Well, you know, that one, it was funny. We won a talent show, and we got, it was a battle of the bands kind of thing where you got some recording time at a studio in Owensboro, Kentucky. And, that was sort of the first time, you know, I went in the studio. I didn't know anything. I'd spent some time with a Tascam 4-track or whatever. But that was a big one, I think, for me, just to, the first time you really hear yourself back on a recording and kind of realize what's good and what's not. And then that was the first time that you really started to get feedback on songs and play songs for people. It was the first time that people would say that you weren't good enough. So that was a big
interesting
awakening. I just thought it'd be this thing like, I sing in these songs, surely these doors will just open and I can do this for a living. And there were a lot of slammed doors in your face, which is sounds silly to say, but was really a positive long term, because it made me kind of go like, well, wait, why do you like these songs by this person or this artist? Like, what am I not doing? What do I need to do better? It was a lot of eye opening at that point.
What was the thing what was like the, not the biggest thing, but the most important thing that you found out that you needed to do better?
The songwriting part. My singing, I guess when I first started, I was really just more of a singer, and then kind of started to have to be a song guitar player after that. But I had a decent enough voice. I think I could probably sing my way out of slightly above average songs sometimes. And,
right.
It didn't dawn on me for a while that just wasn't, like, you had to have good songs. Then if you could sing them really well, then that was an extra bonus. But the idea that you could sort of, I think there was a period where I probably had songs that were maybe 75% where they needed to be sometimes, and then it would sort of rest on this crutch of being a decent vocalist, and you kind of go, I'll sing my way out of the end instead of really focusing on what could make this song better. So a lot of it for me was really focusing on the actual art of being a writer, of really trying to look at what you're saying, not just how you're saying it.
What was the biggest as far as writing, what was the sort of aha moment, or not, that's a wrong question. What was the thing that improved your writing the most? Because, before this started, I was like telling you, man, you're just a tremendous writer. And you're very vulnerable as a vocalist, because your vocals are so good and strong. They're front and center. And like, that takes, you got to be good at that, which you are. But from a structure song, what was the thing that pushed you over the edge, sort of?
A lot of it was just time and repetition, and really just gradually continuing to try and pay attention to the songs that I loved. What did they do that was different? And then a big one for me was when I first really started doing my own thing. And when I met Dan Baird, it was a pretty transitional moment for me. Because, he was a guy that I had grown up, my first bands that I was, like a band that I was in high school, we played 2 gigs or whatever in some parking lot somewhere. But, we did 10 Leonard Skinner songs, 5 Allman Brothers songs, 2 original songs that were probably awful, and we did 2 Georgia Satellite songs. That was a big thing for me. And when Dan started working in the band, like when I could play a song and get him excited, that was a big one for me, that I was like, okay, there's a reason. Like, here's a guy that, he didn't have any reason to be flopping around in an old beat up van for $30 a night, unless he thinks that there's something that's enjoyable here. And, so he would give me feedback on songs, and not in a peer way, there's a lot of dudes in Nashville, you get a record deal and dudes come out of the woodwork to want to tell you about how to write songs, or to write songs with you because they're trying to latch on to somebody with a record deal. And Dan was never that. Dan was just like, I want to be a kick-ass guitar player in your band. But then the feedback would just be, physically how he would react to the songs or what he'd say about a lyric. That was a big one for me. I kind of felt like a professional for the first time, I think.
Yeah. He mentioned that traveling around with you for like $50 a night in his interview. And he said he would come home to his wife and she'd look at how much money he had. And he said, honey, it was worth every penny.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I mean, and I don't think that I think it's lost. I mean, when I'm saying 50, like it was $50, possibly sometimes divided 4 ways. I mean, we were sleeping, we were in one hotel room. There were 4 of us. I mean, it was awful, and it was wonderful. I mean, the band,
that's what he said.
The shows were just so fun, and they were reckless and raw, and but I mean, Dan at the time was he was in his mid-50s probably, and I remember we laughed because there was one night, we would check into a hotel that wouldn't let you have 4 people in a room. And we weren't staying at like a nice hotel. We're staying at the truck stop inn or whatever. And I remember one night pulling up to the window, and there's a guy behind the glass trying to check us in. And we had 2 of the guys lay down on the floor, one of which was Dan, like lay down in the back seat so they couldn't see that we had people. And as I was getting out and shutting the door, I heard him say, "Damn it, I am old enough to be president." And we shut the door and went and got our room. Went and all slept in 2 beds. It was incredible, man, that he would even take the time to do that for 2 years. It's crazy to think.
Yeah. Well, man, he loves your music, so.
Well, he's a good dude. I mean, he's still a real mentor and just a dear friend. He's one of those guys that I can depend on anytime, and I know it, and I hope he feels the same way.
Yeah, I think he does, man. I think he does.
Good.
So then Atlantic signs you, but you wound up getting out of your contract. What happened there, and how the hell did you get out of your deal? Because from what I understand, that is not easy.
Yeah, well, so that was interesting. We made the Carousel on my own, and then made a little noise with that. They signed us, and they re-released that record as sort of a first release. We toured on that for about 1.5 years with Atlantic, and then we made the second record, Blackbird on a Lonely Wire, and that was the real major label experience. We went and lived in LA and worked with big time producers and in big time studios. And that record lasted a couple of years by the time we had released it and toured a bunch. And then the next thing I had written, it was 2004 at that point, and I had written the first little batch of I guess political songs, for lack of a better, sort of political or social themed songs. And we had holed up in a little studio. I took the live band and we went down to Oxford, Mississippi, and made this little 7-song EP called the America EP. And we went to the label with that as what was going to be the next release. And at that point, I'd worked really hard. Everybody at the label was real supportive. I liked them. I think they liked me. And they just flat out said, look, we love you. We love how you work. If this is the record and the type of stuff you want to do, we support it. We even support how you feel. But it's just, this isn't a record that we can put out and do anything with. And I said, if this is really what you want to do. Political
comments or
Yeah, I think that was it. I mean, I don't think at that point there was much interest, and it may have been, if I was Neil Young or somebody like that, with a ton of credibility and success, I'm sure they would have felt differently. But when you've got still a relatively new artist that's kind of an album and a half into his career, and you're really trying to break something at, the thing with major labels that I realized through that is, they work on such a scale. I mean, to really be successful at a major label, you have to just sell a pretty asinine amount. I mean, at that, Hootie and the Blowfish was there, and they were disappointed that their second record had only 14 million copies instead of the 28 million that they had sold before. And so you start to realize, like, if I can sell 25,000 records, they don't. And when I say they don't care, I don't mean that they don't care about me, but that doesn't even pay one of their interns, salaries for the year.
Wow, so, I didn't know the numbers were that staggering.
It's pretty big, man. And so, again, they throw a lot out there. Then with you know, if they can get one or two Adeles every couple years, then it pays for everything. But again, the singer-songwriter dude that's going to sell a few thousand records, it doesn't really behoove them to be in that world. So again, because I think that we had really developed good relationships, you know, I said, well, this is what I want to do. And I said, well, why don't you take this record? Because I had paid for this new one myself. And so
okay, there was you weren't into them for the advances or anything.
Not for that third, not for the EP, because it had kind of just been done.
What made you do that? Because I thought usually they fund all these things. I mean, it turned out to be a good thing.
No, and it is. The difference is also once somebody gives you a check, you know, they may give you $25,000 to make the record, but they want $35,000 worth of input on the record too.
Yeah. So, okay.
You know, for me, it was. I think I knew going in that was going to be a little of a hard thing to try to sell the label on. So I wanted to go in and try to have it done, to go to them and go, hey, here's sort of what I'm thinking. And again, they just, that's not the business they wanted to be in. And we shook hands, and I was heartbroken about it a little bit, because you want to believe that you're going to do all of that work and it really becomes something that's bigger, but it didn't. And then that also sort of rekindled the idea for me that, you know, this is how I want to do this and make a living in records. And so I just sort of kept the ball moving forward. At that point, we did it on our own, and that ended up being a really pivotal moment. Another one of those moments for me, like, okay, I can say the things I want to say. I can make records how I want to make records. And, you know, that was the first time, you know, again, lots of folks would say, you know, you really shouldn't do songs like this. You're going to alienate part of your audience, or you're going to do all of these things. But that was the moment that, you know, we did our record release show at in Nashville. And I remember, you know, Steve Earle bought a ticket and came and sat in the balcony and watched the whole show. And that was one for me. Again, I didn't know Steve at the time, but it was cool. And it was because he had heard a song on the radio from that record and thought it was cool. And I always liked that he was spoken, and, you know, anytime somewhat progressive redneck, I'm always a fan of that. And Steve did the bill for that.
A progressive redneck.
Yeah. So that was cool. And so again, I just feel like that was another one of, like, if I'm doing the art for the right reasons, the ball keeps moving forward.
It's interesting that they would feel like if they were a conventional business, like a non-entertainment business, I can understand that. But I mean, the whole genre of rock and roll was built on, you know, kids talking about, hey man, we're pissed off about how shit's going and let's make some music about it. I'm shocked that like, you know, I guess that's maybe part of the sterility of everything musically that's coming out of big companies.
I think it is. And I think they also just got to where the companies are so big. I mean, really, when you get to a point where, you know, if you can sell 100,000 records, like, that's a lot of people when you really stop to think about it. I mean, like, 100,000 records is a lot of records.
Hell yeah.
And, you know, in the early 90s, I mean, all through the 90s, even the early 2000s, I mean, you know, early 2003, when those records were coming out, I mean, people were still selling 3 million, 2 million, 4 million records on things. And, you know, they just start to predicate their whole business model on that. And so anything, you know, whereas another, you know, your own independent business, if you can grow by 20% every time or whatever that is, you know, that's great. You know, if you sold 10,000 records on the last one and you can sell 50 this one, that's a big, you know, that's a big turnaround, and you can really continue to grow your audience. And that's just not the business that major labels do. And that's okay. Now, you know, working with 30 Tigers here in Nashville now, I mean, that's really how they do their whole business model. And I think there's a big future for that as the business continues to change.
There has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be, man. It's just, it's got to be. Um, so once this happened, did you take over like booking all your own gigs, or like how did that? That's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I had a manager at the time that was still working, and then I had booking agents. So
Okay,
those two
great.
things sort of stayed on track, and we just worked on really being just an independently released record. And we did that one, and then the follow-up record was called The Man Who Killed Love. We did that record independently, and then signed an indie deal with a company called Ryko, and did the next 3 records maybe for them. And again, another learning experience of working with a company, but at least making records with somebody else's money, which is
nice. Yeah. Wow. Um, what were some of the challenges early on, like during this time, as far as like getting visibility and maybe even like defining the sound you wanted, or the I hate to use the word the image, but the presentation you wanted to align with your music?
Well, that's always been the challenge, and I would say it probably still the case. I mean, even early on, signing with Atlantic, there was this sort of, and obviously I was in Nashville, so the powers that be in Nashville, the suits and the labels, they would hear these records or come see these shows because we were selling enough tickets that anybody that was in the business would start paying attention. And, in Nashville, we would be way too rock for the country labels. But then in, New York and LA, we would be way too country for the rock labels. And so there was,
Right.
that was always the issue. I mean, even with Atlantic, that was the thing of how do we, and it was a little bit the Americana tent exists now where it didn't at the time.
Yeah.
And so, there was always a push. Labels would want me to define more of one of those two things.
Yeah. Country or rock.
Yeah. And kind of, and never the two shall meet kind of
Mhm.
moments. And if I were more interested in marketing, I'm certain that my career could have been more commercially successful if I was willing to do one of those two things.
Sure.
And I just never was. I mean, I love rock. I love country. I mean, I don't see those two things as very different. And
you got to make
always feel
music
like,
that comes from your heart, man. That's
yeah.
not, you can't say, hey man, listen, I'm going to have a conversation with my soul and tell it to work with, I mean, that doesn't even make
feel
sense.
a little bit less of this other thing. And,
Right.
I always looked at it too. I mean, again, like, I feel like the giants that you sort of lay these big footsteps out in front of you for you to try to follow. I mean, I don't feel like Neil Young was ever, he was never ashamed that when he came here and was making records in Nashville and making things that sounded really country, nobody was ever worried about whether Neil Young was a country artist or not. Same thing with Jackson Brown. I mean, Tom Petty in a lot of ways. I mean, so I was just never gonna, I mean, to my own detriment probably, but I was never going to be able to do more or less of those things unless the music called for it. Now, I've made some records that are more rock or more country, but it's got to be art driven. It can't be, okay, I'm going to really try to make a country push, so I got to put my hat on and do all of the things. I was never going to be able to do that.
No, I'd say it's to your credit, not to your detriment, because I mean, you can't, if you're going to perform music, or anybody is going to perform music and it's inconsistent with what they're feeling inside, there's no way it's going to work. No one's going to vibe with, I mean, I couldn't see that being possible.
Well, it comes off as contrived, I think.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite moments in this whole roller coaster was, a year or so ago, you got a call from Mike Ness from Social Distortion.
Oh, wow.
Didn't know him at all. I mean, I was a fan for years. I mean, that was one of those bands when I first started playing guitar that it made sense to me. And it was this weird mix of, like, it was punk, but it also, you know, they were playing Johnny Cash songs, and
Yeah,
so
it
it
was
was like
punk twang.
yeah, but like it had stories.
Yeah.
It wasn't just this, and it wasn't all just fast and angry. It was like there was a reason, and there were stories, and there was real parts and melody, and I just loved those records. And randomly, they asked us to go on tour. They were like, you know, we want you to come out and support this North American tour, and my band and I were so freaked out by it, but we went out, and the you know, playing in front of these really big audiences that are there to see Social Distortion. I mean, like it's a commitment, it's a life. And we had some other friends that had played and said, you know, it was a miserable experience. The crowds would just eat them alive waiting on Social D to play. And we just had this exact opposite experience from the very first night, you know, and we didn't go out and sugarcoat our set like, okay, let's try to play the most punk songs I have. Like, let's try to do, you know, we got 45 minutes. Let's put on the coolest 45-minute performance that we can. And it went over like gangbusters. And we were blown away by it. And that, to me, was another one of those exclamation points on why you don't cater to the muse and not to the potential, you know, financial gains or whatever it is. And
yeah,
you know,
and that's a key word you just said, potential, because you could do all these things.
Yeah,
there's no guarantee for anybody that like, oh, that's going to sell. So then you sell your soul to the devil, and you're miserable, and you're not making money.
And most of the times that's what happens.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, there's not a lot of those stories where you hear somebody go, man, you know, I just I got the different haircut, and I put on the jeans that they told me to, and I did all of this, and man, it really worked. We sold a lot of records, and I'm really happy. Like, I don't hear those things. Right?
Yeah.
I hear it being the total opposite. So you're exactly right. I mean, to do all of those things and then fail.
Yeah.
Like, wow, man, that's soul sucking to me. Like,
how do you look at yourself in the mirror? That's,
I don't know.
No, that's got to be.
And I hope to never find out.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny when you said Social Distortion, I thought right away, I said, oh my God, that's a perfect band for you to open, because their music is not categorized either. So I'm not surprised that you guys did really well in front. Yeah.
It was cool, man. And, you know, and it was really interesting to, you know, to see. I'm also fascinated, like, the longer that you do this, you know, when you're young, it just is this sort of, everything's just rock and roll, and you want it to be this cool, you know, it just happens, man. You know, it's all natural, and it's awesome. And the longer you're in it, and you start to really see the guys and the girls that are successful long term, this shit's not a joke. Like, this is not something like, you know, like Ness and that whole camp, you know, they're out there with a purpose. They want the show is done in a way that matters, but they're also, you know, they're taking care of themselves with how they eat and how they operate off stage. And those are things, again, when you're in your 20s, there's not a lot of that. It's just punish yourself as much as you can, and you pay for it. Like, that's just a lifestyle that can't be maintained long term. So it's a cool thing to see with guys like that on the road.
So you learned a lot from those guys about longevity.
Yeah, I mean, hell yeah.
It takes.
They've been a band since shortly after I was born.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think they started doing First Socialistas in 79, I think the t-shirt says. And yeah, man, anybody that's doing anything for that long and still cool about it, like, there's graduate level studying to do from that, for sure.
No, totally. That's great, man. One thing I mentioned earlier, I really appreciated the 110% that you're putting into something. You can feel that as a listener, and you can feel when it's not 110% either. You know, and you're a listener, fan of music yourself, so I know you experience that. Your last two records were pretty deep and a little bit dark lyrically, which I like. What are the primary message that I shouldn't say message, but what is important to you now that you're trying to put out there and work with?
Well, the passion thing that you mentioned is always there. And some of it with kids, when we were talking before we started recording, I got boys that are 13 and 10, almost 10. And, the world is, they're old enough, they're paying attention at this point, and they see the things that are happening in our community here and on TV globally and things like that. And I want them to see, one, just passionately, like I want them to know that I work hard and this shit really matters to me. And like the house that we live in because this shit matters to me, and we work really hard at it. So there's that from a work ethic level that I hope that they pick up on. And then also them to, the last record, the My American Dream record was really politically focused. I mean, it was a concept record, really and truly. And another thing there, I don't want them to look back in 30 years, when the stuff that we're going through is being talked about in history classes. I don't want them to question where I stood on things. I mean, I want to have left a mark of trying to do the right things and be on the right side of helping everybody try to have a better life, and all of these, another big cliches, but it's important to me. And I want to teach them, hopefully, to, I was raised in small southern towns. Using your voice against things that you don't necessarily believe in is not always easy.
I'm sure.
And so, I had my own bumps and scrapes with that growing up, and I want to try to make that an easier thing for them and for other kids growing up here too. So I'm hoping that there's some sort of maybe even a little bit of a roadmap for a 17 or 18-year-old kid to go, oh, okay, I feel this, but I don't know where to go. And then you kind of go, okay, here's something that I can move towards.
That's great, man. It's really funny. We were talking earlier about raising kids, and I wrote down the statement. You said, I work hard. This shit matters to me. It's really funny because I can tell you, I used to have those conversations with my kids. In retrospect, I know they were sitting there, and I might as well have been like that guy, the teacher in Charlie Brown. Because I know they were like, like, what the fuck is this guy saying? But now that they're older, they're always like, they're always saying this, Dad, you're the hardest working guy I know. And they all work hard now. So it worked. I think by example, though, not by me. I could almost verbatim tell you I had the same. I work hard. This shit matters to me. I can tell you verbatim. I've said the same thing to my kids, and I know.
And it's cool, and mine are to the age now. Like part of last year, we went out. We did a run of shows, a co-bill with this band called Band of Heathens out of Austin. Really great guys, cool rock band, and shows were really fun. We'd swap off who closed every couple of nights. And my sons came out on the road with us for the first time without my wife. So it was just us and the band. Just the guys. And,
that's cool.
It was fun. But, we would put them to work. Like every night, they'd go to the merch table and help sell merch.
That's great.
After the shows. And, it was cool because, like, the first night they were like, I don't know if this is how are we supposed to do this? And then I explained to them, I was like, look, I'll give you 10%.
Right on, man. There you go. Right.
And they went, man, it was like a light. So they were like, wait a minute. If we do $2,000 worth of merch, they'd get their calculator. They were like, we make $200 and we can split it. I was like, yep. And we've never sold more merch, man. They were out there wheeling and dealing and cutting.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's cool for them to.
Yeah, that's so important, man, to give them a taste of that. That is great.
And I think that we sometimes with rock and roll, my old man had a really shitty just factory job for years when I was a kid. And then his side gig, he was always real passionate about photography, and he had started a photography business as a second job. And he would do everything from, stringing at a newspaper and going and shooting concerts or sporting events. And then he would shoot local stuff for sports leagues and, in the town we grew up in. And, I remember he'd sit up at night because he'd had to put these packets of pictures together that people had ordered. And, it was something we'd sit in front of the TV watching shows, and he would be still doing work. And, it instills some semblance in you of like, okay, this is what doing your own thing and not just working for somebody really looks like. And, there's so many cool things about this job, and there's some real cush shit that comes with it too. I mean, like, we get to go, my kids have gotten to go all over the world, which I didn't get on a plane until I was 27. And so they're seeing shit that's real different than, they're seeing shit that's way different than what I did. But I also want them to know that there's real work involved in it too. It's not just rock star, it's all somebody else's job. Like, if you're going to put your name on the marquee, you got to deal with all of the bullshit too.
Yeah. That's great, man. I think that's so cool. And and there is a huge difference in, that I've observed with the kids that are brought up like that. And the kids are just like given a new car at 16. And my kids were not those kids. And they pissed, and Dad, you're the only guy that's not buying us a car. And I'm like, because it gets them. And I tell them, because these people's parents are fucking stupid. I can't be that dumb. I'm too old to be that dumb, Yeah. But now, again, in retro, they come back and later, and it's like pulling teeth. But later they'll come back. I get it. I understand it now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's the game. It's the parenting long game is the hard part, because
it is so hard.
Yeah, I mean, you get caught trying to win every battle instead of going like, okay, wait a minute. I don't need my wife and I laugh all the time with the thing of like, I don't have the need to have, especially when they were younger, when they were 5 and 3 or whatever. It's like, I don't have to have the most talented, smartest 5-year-old and 3. Like, ain't nobody winning an award for a 5 and a 3-year-old that anybody's going to remember by the time they're 6 or 7. Like, I want 40-year-olds that are well-adjusted and healthy and happy and shit. Like,
functional.
Yeah.
That's totally cool, man. That's going to be a big challenge, because you're going to run up against it, and you're going to be when you're driven by work ethic, you're going to be looking around like, I cannot believe this shit. I mean, just real quick, there was we live in a middle-class area.
Yeah.
There was a family that went to one of my kids' schools, or my daughter's school, and I guess they had a bunch of money. The kid, when he was 15, they bought him a brand new $60,000 BMW. And they had, right. I was hysterical when I heard that. Right. That's the most like hilarious thing. And they didn't want him to wait. They put it on the thing when he was almost, because once he turned 16, they wanted him to have the car. And I was laughing like that, like, wow, you are destroying this kid. But I guess you think it's nice that he's got that big swinging dick with the BMW, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah.
I mean, hello. I mean, but
right.
That's exactly what I did when I heard that. I burst out laughing.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have any other reaction? Like, because it's hilarious.
Did you not watch any high school movies like growing up that you realize the dickhead with the BMW is not the kid you want to be your kid? Like,
I know, and it's
not hard to figure out.
I know, and they're gonna crash it immediately. Yeah. Anyway, so right on, man. Keep doing that shit. You're gonna be fighting against a slew of stupid parents, but it's gonna pay off. Trust me.
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, it will. Trust me. Hey, I want to talk about your new record, Tiny Little Movies. Again, it's listed as an Americana record. It rocks as hard as any music you listen to, and you're going to get really fired up. Listen to it as I was. I just wanted to talk to you about some of the songs that I really enjoyed on it. Man, I listened to this one. I think I sent you a text right away. Even the river runs out of this town. This is, man, what a beautiful song, man. Tell me the backstory to that.
That's one of my favorites. For one, the end result is one of my favorites, but even just the process. I got together with my friend Rob Snyder and an old friend Jonathan Singleton. Both of them are really commercially successful, pop country songwriters here in town. And we got together to write and we hadn't seen one another. We caught up for a while, and it was one of those sessions where you kind of get together and none of us have any ideas. It was like, okay, we've got nothing. And Rob had literally the title. He said he had written down this thing, so it said, Even the River Runs Out of His Town. Didn't know what it was about, had nothing. And Singleton, we kind of, the title sounded cool. And so Singleton played a little bit of this guitar figure, and it was one of those, it was sort of the epicenter of the whole Tiny Little Movies idea. Like, to me, it just started to lay out in front of us real quick. And I started writing verses almost just in real time in the room. And within a pretty short amount of time, we had just carved that out. It became this really interesting story about love. On a simple front, I think it's just a story of a guy that loves a girl enough to really hope that she goes on to something bigger, because he really knows that she deserves more than that. But I think that it also just sort of felt a little bit like a song about saying goodbye to even just your own childhood, and kind of felt a little bigger than that too. But it's one I'm real proud of. I mean, those co-write things are not always great, and when they are like that, when you go in and everybody really brings sort of an A-game moment, it feels pretty special.
Beautiful song. Is that like, do they still like release singles? Is that the single for that record?
I don't know. Where we are, they don't. I mean, I think there are, the country world still does, the rock world still does, but for us, with mostly Americana stuff, it's really just the record, and they kind of just play with it. Well, everybody, that's another one that maybe somebody will take and do their own thing with, which would be fine.
It's a beautiful song, man. It's really, really special. Another one I loved is This All You Wanted Me For? And that sounds like a very painful, unwilling breakup. Is that like from experience or?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I tell my wife I had all sorts of great shitty experiences before we got together. So I still have years of therapy to mine, which is good.
Right on. Lots of records left.
Yeah, I still got plenty of heartbreak records. And you get to the point too. I mean, we've been together now 15, 16 years.
Oh, congrats, man. That's nice.
Thanks.
Yeah,
and it's cool because, you see the other people, you're together long enough that you start to see peers fall apart in relationships and things like that. So some of it is also, we had some friends that were going through the ringers of divorce, and you try to sort of, you can look at it through some different lenses too, to get some of those.
To get some of the song ideas. Yeah. Depending upon what perspective. Yeah. That's pretty smart. Yeah. That's a beautiful song, man. It's a really good song. And I wanted to ask you about one track in My American Dream. That is another, I mean, it's really amazing. Both these records are pretty powerful, man. Back to back like that. That's, pretty intense. So this is from My American Dream, which was released in 2018. Still a Southern Man. That I think maybe what you were referring to earlier about growing up in the South. Talk about the backstory to that song, because you are on fire in that whole track.
Yeah, that was written the night of the shooting at the Emmanuel Baptist Church in Charleston, South Carolina. We were on the road somewhere in Kansas, and I literally just wrote it sitting backstage. I grew up we moved from Nashville to Franklin, Tennessee, which is about 20 miles south. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I grew up in that little town. And the mascot there was the Franklin Rebels. I mean, it was when I grew up there, my first best friend, his dad was the high school basketball coach at Franklin High. We would go to all the games, and, it was my first like rock star access to anything. We could go and get free Cokes in the press lounge and all of that. And it was like Hoosiers, man. I mean, like all I wanted to be was a Franklin Rebel basketball player when I grew up. And that community really meant the world to me. And, it was the Franklin Rebels. So I never saw the Rebel flag was this representation of being a rebel and being somebody that didn't take shit off of anybody and didn't, I always saw the South and the Civil War as a terrible idea. I mean, I was not one of these that was like, well, the South was great. I always thought the South was totally in the wrong for all of those things, but I just didn't see the rebel flag. I just saw it as our mascot. I wasn't empathetic enough to maybe look at that through other folks' lenses, even my friends of color. I mean, it never dawned on me. I remember, once a friend, we were going to go play a game in Memphis, and they said, I hope they don't bring that rebel flag to Memphis. And I remember thinking, like, why would I bring the rebel flag to Memphis? Like, that's racist. Like, that would be really racist. But I didn't think that it would be racist for all of my friends of color that I spent every day of my life with.
Right.
To have to go to school. And, then that flag would fly at, all along people's houses. There's a Confederate statue in the town square. The Ku Klux Klan would have meetings or, every couple of months, like handing out paperwork on the town square. Like
in Franklin?
In Franklin, Tennessee.
Holy shit.
And not
that's like a shishi suburb now.
It's like a fancy ass tourist destination now.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. And again, I'm not talking about in 1870. I'm talking about in like 1989, 1985. Wow. That shit was still happening there. And it was not, and then with the college, and then once I really started touring and seeing the world, and I remember being in Germany one time, and I know it's the cliche, but, you look around and you go, oh, wait, there is no Nazi memorabilia. Like, it's not this thing that they go, oh, it's cool, it was just German heritage.
Oh, no, they're not even allowed to talk about it there.
No.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how it should be. Certainly not something that's going to be celebrated. You want to have it in a museum, that's fine. And it was a big eye-opener for me. And so, just after really realizing the hatred that really is what that symbol represents, I wrote that song as my own revelation of hoping that we can get rid of that in public spaces as quickly as possible.
Very powerful song, man.
Thank you.
Really, really deep, very deep. I've had a couple of other, man, I bet you're familiar with these people that are deep Southerners, but are very much opposed. They saw a lot of racism when they were kids, and it pushed them the other way. Like Amy Ray, I had on here, from Niggo Girls. She was quite funny. Jimbo Mathis, I'm sure you know Jimbo.
Yeah.
I think he's like an Oxford guy.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Will Kimbrough.
Uh-huh.
And then Joe McMahon.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those guys mentioned the same thing. They grew up in the Deep South, and they grew up with that was a normal thing there, and it really put them off.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's you learn a lot of things because you start to really realize how ingrained that is, and how it's pretty fucked up, to think this, when you go to the bank, where you park your car on the square and you're walking under a monument celebrating, a group of people that took up arms to try and destroy our country. And then a statue that's really put there commemorating it, to 100 years after the Civil War, when it's just Jim Crow and trying to show black people that, powerful in them. It's really disturbing and kind of funny that we're still talking about it, but it just feels like there's enough of I think it's finally starting to really change. I think there's enough of us down here. I think people have always looked from afar and gone like, what are these fucking hayseed sick, kids?
Dude, let me tell you, I'm from the Bronx. We had none of this stuff up there. It was like everybody was from somewhere else. Everybody was a different color. And when I came to the South, it was really weird, to be honest. Yeah. It's like, holy shit, man. It was,
Yeah. And then you just don't, it's a strange thing when you grow up with it. And I think that, all the folks you just mentioned and lots more. I mean, the guys from Drive-By Truckers and Isbell and BJ Barham from American Aquarium. I mean, there's way more of us folks that really do look at it. Again, the South has shit tons of things to be proud of. I mean, it's my favorite food, my favorite literature, my favorite music, my favorite landscapes. I mean, like, yeah, you know, I can go on and we can do a whole other episode about what's great about the South.
Sure.
It's just, you know, the rebel flag is not part of it. The Civil War is not part of it. Racism is not a part of it. I mean, that's pretty simple, really.
I think enough people are feeling that way now that hopefully, you know, it shit'll be minimized moving forward. And I will tell you that my kids, the amount of racism they've been exposed to is way less than even though I'm a New York City guy, way less than what I got exposed to.
Oh,
for sure. And so, and your kids are younger than mine, so it's going to be even diluted even more. And I do see that moving forward.
And it's fun to see it that way, you know, because again, you just start to realize like the kids are just, they're not putting up with that shit. I mean, you know, my oldest, you know, 5th grade, you know, some kids started this, it's called GSA. It was the Gay Straight Alliance. It's a public school in Nashville, Tennessee. This isn't, you know, a liberal bastion of blue necessarily. And, you know, it's kids that are straight and kids that in 5th and 6th grade, there were no kids that were out in the school I grew up in.
No, that's pretty young. But although I don't know, I'm not. Yeah, I guess maybe that's
right.
the age now.
Yeah, nobody. I don't even know in high school that we had people that were really out. I mean, there were people that you kind of knew, but there was nobody that was really out, which is a terrible thing to think that you had to feel that way. And you know, for you know, my kids to just, you know, go and say, well, you know, my friend Chris is gay, and I just want to support and make sure that, you know, to learn and see what that experience is like and see how we can all help. And I don't know, man. I mean, those are the things that are really inspiring.
Yeah, that is pretty
realize cool. If we can just not fuck them all up, they'll fix all of the shit that our parents did wrong.
God, I was afraid to even let people know I was smoking weed at that age.
Right. Yeah.
And much more
right.
Neanderthal problems than that. God.
Yeah.
Man, you've been doing this a long time now. Tell me, what would you say? And let me just to close that up. I would love everybody to please listen to as much of Will's catalog as you can. But if you're going to listen to the most recent record, Tiny Little Movies, there's a ton of great tracks. All the Pretty Horses is beautiful. Even man, if you just have time to listen to one, listen to Even the River Runs Out of This Town. And then My American Dream, the whole album's great, but you know, Still a Southern Man, Oh Mr. Barnum, there's just some great songs. But please check those out. Oh man, it's my pleasure. I'd love people to hear this. You've been doing this a while. What would you say the top 3 musical experiences that you had?
Signing with Atlantic and getting to sit with Ahmet Ertegun and
talk
about. Yeah, I mean, that was a big deal for me. Like, I grew up with, you know, looking at that Atlantic label.
Yeah.
Thinking about Ray Charles and Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, Led Zeppelin, Stones. I mean, there was just, you know, to sit there and listen to him tell stories and then talk about my record and what he liked and what we thought we could do. I mean, that was pretty special.
That's really, what was he like? Does he have like one of those larger than life presences, or is he laid back? Because he seems like a laid back dude.
He was laid back, but it was still pretty larger than life. And, you know, it was funny because, you know, it was at the Atlantic building on Avenue of the Americas in New York, and you'd go up and, you know, they just beep you in. Like, we were in our A&R guy's office, and, you know, they call him, they're like, Mr. Ertegun wants to see the boys. That's what they said. And so you get on some elevator and you go up, and it is like all of a sudden you're in 1974. Like, you really, this elevator opens and it's wood paneling, and there's like gold records and platinum records everywhere. It smells like mahogany. And then he's just there in his office, and, you know, then he starts telling stories, you know, the same way that you and I may talk about, you know, you talk about you're going to interview Steve Gorman, and I talk about being in a band with Dan Baird. It's not name dropping. It's just like, that's your job and people you talk to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mr. Ertegun would then start to tell you a story about his friend, Prince, you know, who was out opening for the Rolling Stones because his friend Mick, I mean, you know, just these things that you're like, holy shit, like this isn't name dropping. This is just your peer group is the soundtrack of my life. So that was really amazing.
That is great, man.
It was cool getting to be in LA and work in the studios out there, like Sunset Sound, where all of those great Carole King, that's where she cut Tapestry, was the room that we worked in. We worked in the great studio where they had cut, that was at Henson, and at Sunset Sound, where the Doors had recorded some stuff there. So it was cool to sort of get to see that. And then the success of Even If It Breaks Your Heart, I mean, really getting to be nominated for a Grammy Award, that's not something that I would have ever expected to have been a part of. And it was cool to kind of get to see how the other half live for a little bit. That was exciting.
Let me ask you this. You're like really driven. Where does that come from?
I mean, some is probably just instinctual, I would think. My folks worked hard growing up, and I mean, some of it is just that I don't have any fallback plan. This would all be different maybe if my folks were super wealthy and it was just like, I'll do this, and if nothing else, then I'll go work at my dad's law firm or take over the family business. Like, maybe it would be different, but I don't have I made a list a couple of years ago and I got frustrated. I thought, all right, let me go all the way down this well. And so I'm going to quit. I'm never going to do this again. I made a list of things that I was qualified to do, and it was substitute school teacher and truck driver. Those are the only two things basically that I can do.
See the country.
Yeah. Which, I kind of do already anyway. So, part of the drive is that I can't do anything else. And so I don't want to, I want to try to not be bad at the one thing I can do.
But work ethic is also how you define yourself. Cause like when you said to your kids, hey man, it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that about? I'm trying to learn cause I'm like that and I don't know necessarily why.
I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a question. I haven't thought about it. So some of my stammering is as I try to think about it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I grew up doing when I quit school or even in the summers, I was always working, a construction job or a landscaping job for somebody, something where it's results driven. You go and at 6 a.m, you start working and doing something at somebody's house. And then at 6 p.m, when you're done, you look and there's this thing that didn't exist before. Right. I think I like that.
It's kind of what you do now.
It is what
as a creative, man. I mean,
so it's just the same thing. I mean, sort of like you take this blank page that nothing is there, and then you try to turn that into something. And I do. So that is part of it. And then the other part is also, I have my little inner redneck voice that I just fucking love. It's the thing of you can't do that. And I think growing up a lot, I heard that, because, that's just something you can't, that's too hard. You can't do that. You can't. And there's a part of me, and that's like I say, that's the sort of proud redneck part where I go, okay, really? You don't think I can't? Okay, well, I will now work my ass off just to prove you wrong. There's a little vindictive, my little inner redneck won't, will say sort of, hold on and watch this, I guess.
No, man, I get that because like righteous indignation has propelled me, to work very hard at times. So I totally get that, man.
Well, and I think that's what, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of great rock and roll that is born out of that. I mean, that's to me it's what the Who did. That's what Joe Strummer and the Clash did. I mean, there's lots of that across the board where it's like, okay, cool. Well, sit back and watch this.
Well, it's really funny. Like I've noticed because I talk with so many people, those are the people that I'm attracted to for some reason. And then that unfolds like, oh, I get it. We have the same dysfunction maybe, or I don't know what you want to call it, but it's interesting. It's almost like like an unspoken bond you know, like we're the guys that say fuck you and someone says you can't do that, you know. Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I was always attracted to that. I think in sports, in art, in just people in towns growing up. I'm just fascinated by that mentality.
Yeah, it's tremendous. And man, that's what's it's so spirited.
I hope so.
Yeah, you can't be like that and be a pussy.
Right.
I mean,
it doesn't go well.
It's not compatible, man.
Right.
I read, I don't know if this is accurate, that your dad sang on stage with you for one of your gigs. Is that true?
Yeah, man. I had an accident back during the making of the Wreckage album, which was 2008. Yeah, I was in this really bad accident. So I was laid up for about a year and a half and couldn't play and couldn't do any of that. And when I was finally able to really walk and do all the things that kind of needed to be done to play again, we booked, like, I think it was every Monday for 4 weeks or 6 weeks at this club called 12th and Porter. And it was just, there was no new record really. We were just sort of playing to play. And it was really, really cool. And had different guests. You know, Dan came and played a couple of nights and different people. But yeah, my dad got up and we did that old Animals tune, We Gotta Get Out of This Place.
Oh, that is so cool. That must have been great singing with your dad.
Awesome. It was so fun. And Dan played with us that night too.
That's great,
it was really, really fun. Yeah.
The recovery sessions, is that what that was called?
The recovery sessions. That's right.
That, man. How are you feeling now? You okay?
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, it's been 11 years almost, and there's, you know, lots of physical therapy still and having to do that, but you know, I'm still here, so I have a hard time bitching about it too.
I hear. You're in pretty good shape. We were talking about that earlier. Do you do anything? Like, do you run or swim or something?
Yeah, I try to run a little. My knees and legs don't do particularly well with the banging. Yeah, I try to swim. I mean, just try to do all of it. I mean, again, all these really boring, you know, I was laughing with a friend of mine that played drums with me for a long time and has this great graphic design company now. He does all the album cover stuff for me. His name's Keith Brogdon.
Oh, I'll tell
Thinking Out Loud design. He does really, really killer work.
Dude, your cover's like just My American Dream. I love that cover, man.
Well, he did all of that, man. He's great. But,
great
you know,
stuff.
we laughed. You know, when we met and we were playing in bands, you know, everything was about rock and roll and girls and shows, and it was just all of these things. And now we talk, and it's incredibly fulfilling. He's one of my favorite people. But, you know, our last conversation was about yoga and meditation and all these different things. Like, what meditation app do you suggest? And how do you do all of that? And, you know, when you're running, it's just all these incredibly on rock and roll things. But, yeah, you got to, you know, again, if you want to still do this shit, you got to.
Yeah, man, you got to take care of yourself for sure, man. Well, I'm glad you're doing better.
Man, thank you.
Man, what were some of the low points or dark periods you've had to deal with, and how'd you get through them?
Dark periods that, you know, they come and go. I mean, there's kind of a dark period. The deal ending with Atlantic was really dark for me, and honestly, even the part of making the record for Atlantic got dark. Living in LA and kind of riding that roller coaster. If you're going to make a record, and then it was just really hard. That was dark. Those were tough. And then that period after the accident, you know, there was you know, like I said, during the recovery for that was the first time probably in my career where I didn't even think about music at all. I mean, you know, it wasn't even it had always at least been on a back burner, even through any of the other things that you go through. And that was the one where I was like, I don't, you know, maybe I can't do this anymore. Like physically, it may be something that I can't do. And then had to break through that. And then there was a point after the success of Even If It Breaks Your Heart, you know, everything changes, and all of a sudden I was a songwriter and I got a publishing deal, and people, you know, all of a sudden paying you to write songs, and you start thinking, shit, man, if I could get one more of these things, like I can be off to the races. And that's a real dark world for me, because it goes more into that making music for commerce versus making music for art. And so there was a real dark time there for me. That's probably 4.5 years ago. And the thing that's gotten me out of it is, therapy is big.
Yeah.
Having somebody to really talk to, being more open in my relationships, also really just trying to be more vulnerable. Vulnerability in songs has always come pretty easy. Vulnerability in my daily interactions is not. So I've tried to get better about those things. And then the family's always hugely helpful. My kids are such a joy to be around. And in these moments, they're the great leveler of the roller coaster, because, I can come home you can go and have the greatest week of shows you've ever had. And you sell a ton of tickets and you sell merch and you just feel like you're taking over the world. You come home and the kids just want to go swimming and play basketball and want you to read a book to them. The next week you go out and it's the worst shows you've ever had. Nobody came and everything sucks. And you come home and the kids just want to swim and play basketball and have you read a book to them. And so that's been really cool too, to really see that, having what I feel like is a real anchor and some normalcy at home has been real helpful.
If you're comfortable, and if you're not, we don't have to talk about it. I'm curious about the vulnerability thing, because I've dealt with that, and I went through some therapy and some programs I'm working, and actually this show helped me become much more vulnerable.
Oh, wow. Well,
you know what? Because I would talk, musicians are wonderful because they're very open.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, man, I would really like to be more like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, but I had this 6-inch fortress around me that, so I had to do a little work on that, a lot of work on that. At any part of your experience that you're comfortable sharing, and if not, it's totally cool. I'm just curious.
No, I mean,
like what prompted you to say, "Hey, man, I need to do this"?
My marriage was a big part of it. And there was never anything. It's not this there was no incident. There's not any of these big issues,
sure.
But but it's just that moment of really why can I not? I grew up in a family. My folks got divorced after 35 years.
Oh my God! You hear these things like
crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and my parents, if you had told any of my family or friends, people that hang around, my parents, they didn't fight. They were, but what I've realized in looking back is they never communicated really at all. Everything was just real surface.
Yeah.
And then once my brother and I were kind of out of the house, and then they had never dealt with one another and how to talk about what you want or you need or what you're feeling. And so you couple that with also being a white male from the South. You're not supposed to really have feelings about anything. You're supposed to just be tough.
Right. Stoic.
And so that's always a bit of a coat you have to shed. And so some of it was just that. I think it was just ingrained and sort of expected, and I was never real comfortable with it. And I think just as I've grown up and kind of what you were saying, the people that you look at that you admire that do things well are generally more well-adjusted. And and I just wanted to have deeper friendships and relationships that really meant something, and I think that growing up, I also grew up undereducated, and I feel like I was in a lot of situations where maybe everybody had more money or everybody had more status in their family, and there's a little bit of embarrassment of not wanting to be the kid, I think, that says anything that, like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I should be quiet. And yeah, I just think that there was kind of a reckoning that came with that, of just being willing to say that you don't know something, or say that you're scared about something, or whatever those things may be. Meditation, like I say, helped a ton. But it's just practice. I'm still not great at it. I mean, my wife could come in here now and tell you probably I'm still not great at it, but it's better than it was. And again, my goal is not to be great today and then fall off. I mean, I want to really try and grow that, but I think it's happening more and more. I mean, vulnerability, I don't think that's ever been talked about. I know it's never been talked about in any interviews I've ever done. And I bet 85% of interviews around this record, that word has come up, whether it's about the music or not, or even just in this conversation. Like, yeah, I did an interview with a guy at a little joint down in Texas. I mean, you get two redneck white dudes talking about vulnerability, like that shit. That's a good sign for all of us, man.
Yeah,
really. Like, I just think it's cool that
it really
dudes are starting to get to a point where we can say that we're not all right about something, or say that we do love something, or tell your brother or your dad that you love him. Like, I think those things, and with your kids are a big thing. Like, I don't want that to be something that my kids feel like hugging somebody is weird, or I mean, during COVID maybe it's a little weird, but normal times, like, hug and cry and do whatever it is that you need to do to be a healthy, functioning adult.
Dude, I'll tell you, thank you, man. That was thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. I got a lot of thank you. My sons are almost 30 and 28. When they come over, first thing they do, both of them, and I'm not a big guy, I'm only 5'9". They're both 2, 3 inches, 4 inches taller.
Yeah.
The first thing they do is come over and give me a kiss.
I love it, man.
Yeah, 30 and it's not weird. That's just what we do, and I feel like so great about that.
Well, I laugh. Yeah, my oldest is 13, and so saying he's had this sort of thing where we still put our kids kind of in bed at a certain time every night. Just make sure they're tucked in. It's not crazy. You got to. And,
13 is not 40. I mean,
that's exactly right.
They're not old enough to make their own decisions. They'll stay up till 4 a.m. No, you go to bed at 11 o'clock or whatever your time.
Yeah. And so, but it's funny, like, to still put him in bed, and there's part of this ritual that's literally gone on for 13 years. Like, you put him under this, he likes the blanket first, and then the sheet, and then the cover. But
it's great.
Like, now when I do it, it's like there's hairy legs staring back at you. Like, it's like, wow, I'm tucking in this totally different person.
Yeah.
But it's still there, and there's a safety and a love there that, I'll do it. If he comes home when he's 25, I'll go tuck him in. I don't care. I mean,
yeah. Well, it'd be fun. What's funny is that you get to a certain point where your kids could kick your ass. Yeah. Like, my older son is so strong. I mean, he's like I work out, but he crushes me. I mean, like, I would never, ever, something happened the other day, and Ann, my wife, was like, well, you can be all right. I'm like, I got Nick with me. I'll be fine. Trust me. I could handle myself, but he could totally destroy somebody. So yeah, we're good. Right. Don't worry. Yeah. So it's a funny thing. And when it first happened, I was like, my ego is a little bruised, but then I'm like, I'm old.
Right.
I mean, and this is what happens. I thank God I'm in decent shape, but it's good. It's funny though, man. Thank you, man. I appreciate all that.
Dude, yeah.
What's your favorite song you wrote of your own stuff?
Man, that changes sometimes. I mean, it sounds cliched, but I mean, there's a part where Even If It Breaks Your Heart is always going to be up there, because
sure.
It was a song that from the minute I wrote it just felt like it was my story, and I loved that it was a really completed thought. And then to have it be the commercial success that that was a fun one to get to be a part of.
Did you record that song as well, or did you write it for Eli?
No, the only success I've ever had were songs so I wrote and recorded that on my Wreckage album. and it came out as a single. That was one when I first played it, for years, because that would have been about my fourth record. And I'd always heard, man, you're just one song away. Like you're the one song, you just got to have that one hit that connects. And when I played that one for the producer and my manager, they were like, okay, this is your one. We got to record it. And we did, and it was great. And we put it out as a single, and it just did very little. It got played at a handful of AAA radio stations, and that was it.
Wow.
But the station here in Nashville, Lightning 100, had played it a bunch, and the guys in the Eli Young Band heard it driving through town. We're like, shit. And they had a couple records before that of mine, and they said, we want to record that song. And they did, and it's when they first sent me the recording, I thought they'd sent me my version. Like it was almost... It wasn't like it was this huge departure until it got to the guitar
They didn't change the arrangement or anything.
No, they did a different guitar solo. But I mean, it was pretty true to form. And then to watch it with them, become this multi-million selling smash single was a total trip to watch, and it was a lesson to learn about the difference between, I was making records for this little indie in New York, and they were making records for Scott Borchetta in Nashville. And, but the work that it took to get a #1 record, there's no way. I've never had the resources and things to do that. So
sure.
It was a cool thing to watch. But yeah, so I've never had stuff that was recorded. All the stuff I've ever written for anybody or with the thoughts that this is going to be for somebody else have never gotten recorded. But the things I have had success with are all things that I've put on my records that then somebody else has said.
Oh, keep doing it.
That's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Did you get a gold or platinum record?
It was a platinum single. Yeah.
Is it up? Why is that not on you got your wife's college degrees, dude. You're on an interview.
I got one thing over here that says it was there's one award over here on the wall. I feel so weird about that. And I don't know why. Is it, maybe it's because I've only got one. They've had 10.
It's really funny because people are all, I've had some, and most guys feel exactly like you. They do not, most musicians I have spoken to are totally the same way. They're very humble. And if they have that, it's just like happens to be. But I've had a couple of guys like, it's like shining, man. I gotta it's blinding me with the Grammys and that kind of stuff. So, but most guys are the same as you.
Then you also get to a point like, I went over to Vince Gill is one of my favorites, and he was kind enough. He's always just been so sweet to me, and between he and Amy, his wife, they've got.
Can't imagine.
I can't even fathom how many Grammys and awards. But you go to their place, and they've got enough of them that it's like curtains. Like you walk into somebody's house that has curtains, and you're not like, oh, you're trying to show off with your curtains. It's just like, yeah, it makes the house look fun. Like there's just Grammys and shit sitting around the studio, like, and it's never an ego thing. It's like, here, let me move this 5th Grammy and put a coaster down. So yeah, it's interesting how folks can spread it out.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember the first record you ever purchased?
Yeah, with my own money, the first record I ever purchased was Queen, The Game.
Very cool. Tell me your top 3 Desert Island discs. No particular order, just for right now.
Okay. Blood on the Tracks, Bob Dylan. Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music by Ray Charles. And Pronounced Leonard Skinner by Leonard Skinner.
You had to put a Skinner record in there, man. You can't be from the South and not.
No, you have to have it.
You know what? And again, I hope this doesn't sound like I'm blowing smoke. When I was listening to your records, I said, man, this guy's like Bob Dylan lyrically.
Oh.
Yeah, man. You're, and I'm not like an Americana guy.
Yeah.
And so it was very powerful, man.
Thank you.
Whatever you're doing, just keep doing more of it.
I promise I will.
What do you like? This is a tough question. What do you like most about yourself?
About myself. Man, that is a tough one because there's days where I don't like much of it at all. I want to believe that. What do I like most about myself? I like that I will stand up for what I think is right and fair, sometimes to a fault.
Right on, man. What would your wife say she likes most about you?
Oh, hold on. You want me to just ask her? I don't know.
It could be a first. I don't know. No one's ever done that. You could do that. I always.
What? Hold on. I'm going to ask.
Right on.
Hey, babe.
Great.
Come here just a sec. You don't have to be
great.
on camera. You just have to answer a question.
Breaking new ground. If she wants to come on camera, she can.
Well, we'll see. She may have just gotten out of the pool. She may not want to get on the camera.
In a swimsuit? Yeah, probably not.
She says she does not want to get on the camera. But the question is, what do you like most about me?
What do I love most? Like most of my year? It's hard to narrow down.
I know it's hard, but you can only come up with one.
That's awesome.
I think my favorite thing about you is you are always really strong and clear in your conviction. It's one of my things that always attracted me to you at the start. And you're always really clear and on the side of justice. I'm always proud of that.
Wow, that's pretty close to the same thing you like about yourself. Yeah, right on.
Well, good. Okay.
Thank you very much. That was really sweet of her. Thank you. That was very kind of her to do that. Thank you. That was funny. It's like really, it's the same thing.
Well, it may be just because it's the only good quality about me. There's all these other things. It's the only one that anybody can name.
Well, hey, even a broken clock's right twice a day, right?
That's right. And you saw both times.
Happiest moment or time in your life?
Oh, man. I mean,
that was great.
It's the cliches. I mean, it's a tie between the birth of my two kids, for sure.
Very cool. Most important thing your dad taught you?
Man, there's a lot. You know, my dad was not this wordsmith, not like super deep with things. So there's sort of two moments that I really remember. When Julia and I got pregnant with our first, we weren't married. She was still in college. We'd been dating for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. We got pregnant, and we sat my parents down to tell them that we were going to have a baby. And again, my dad just is pretty happy-go-lucky, never too serious about much anything. I had my speech sort of prepared, and I said, look, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle it. We're not going to get married just yet because we want to wait until she's ready. But, here's what I don't know how we're going to figure it out. And in this, like, real serious moment, he just looked across the table. He said, listen, there's never going to be enough money, and you just figure it out. He said, just don't ever worry about it. Like, you'll figure it out. And it was real calming.
Yeah. For
me. I mean, again, because we didn't have a ton of that growing up, and I saw him work. So that was that was big.
That's great.
And then the other one was just, his love for music. I remember being, the Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction had come out. And that was like the first, like, my generation rock and roll band that was like, this is it. Like, this is life-changing for me. And they were going to be on an award because, we didn't have MTV and shit growing up. And so I wanted to see them on whatever music show they were going to be on. And my folks are always cool with, like, okay, what's this music? Yeah, we'll watch. And so we stayed up late to watch Guns N' Roses. And they came on and they played this acoustic version of Patience. And I just remember my dad going, well, if they're going to be a fucking rock band, why aren't they ripping and snorting? They're just up there playing acoustic music. And I always loved that moment. Like, my dad wanted the band to rock more. So that was a good one too.
That's very cool.
If you're going to do it, do it. Yeah.
Do it right. Yeah. How about your mom? Most important thing she taught you?
She really cares about other people to a fault. Like, sort of takes care. She's a caregiver and wants to do for people, and I think that's something I want to continue to do and get better at.
2 more questions, man, and I cannot thank you enough for this has been very cool, and I really appreciate your time and sincerity. Any hobbies outside of music?
No, I played golf for a little while because I needed to try something new, and I loved that. I paint a little bit. I've gotten way into working in my yard over this time, like planting flowers and doing things that are incredibly un-rock and roll. But that's
what else you got to do?
That's exactly right. Like,
got to do something.
Pretty good at this point. So no, those are the only real things.
And the last question, Will, what's been the biggest change in your personality over like the last 10 years, maybe 7 to 10 years, because you're younger? And how much of that change has been intentional and how much is a natural part of aging?
Being able to be a little more calm about things. My natural inclination is to something I don't like or someone I don't like. There's a little bit of a whip. There's an asshole mentality there that I can get to pretty easily. Just done and cut that off, and like we're done with that, move on to the next thing. That's gotten better. And that's probably 70% effort and 30% time, I would think.
Yeah. Look at you quantifying shit like that. That's pretty impressive there, man.
Yeah. I only know that because it's taken a lot of effort.
So I'd say 72% and then 28%.
18%. Yeah. 18%. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's cool. Yeah. It's less stressful.
It is. And I need as much of that in my life as I can get.
I feel you, brother. Listen, man, I can't thank you enough for your time. You're a total awesome dude. I really appreciate everything about you. And thank you for being so cool on this interview. And I'm so glad I got to get turned on to your music. And I'd love to just tell people what to do to connect with you. All right. A couple of things. First of all, it's Will Hoge. His last name is spelled Hoge. And, I would encourage everybody to go to his website. It's willhoge.com. And if you're going to buy, please listen to his music. This guy is a badass lyricist. He's a great songwriter. He's got a very deep catalog. Most recent record is Tiny Little Movies. And dude, it's funny because the cover of your record, that's like a very intimidating picture. So I really didn't know what I was going to get. No. You're like very normal. I was like, oh my God, this guy's like, it's like a badass. It's a great album cover. It's a very intimidating picture though. It's like, and you're like totally nice guy. Sweetheart.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear you say that. Thank you.
Oh yeah. And I would also love everybody to check out My American Dream, man. That is a killer record. If you're going to buy any of the music, please buy that through willhoge.com. Also on follow Will on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. It's all under Will Hoge, Hoge. What is you're doing performances like every other week, you said?
Yeah, I think the next one is, I know there's for sure one on the 23rd. I think there's maybe one on the 16th too. So they'll start up here in the next week or so. Okay, cool. So just follow him on social media because he's doing performances on there. And he's a very talented guy. I think you got another number one in you, man. I hope you're right.
I think
we'll
you do.
Talk about that.
Hell yeah, we will, man. Anything else that I didn't get to or you want to promote or anything else that turn people on to?
I really appreciate the time. I'm so glad Dan had hooked us up. And
likewise, man. Awesome. You're more than welcome anytime, man. Hang on one second. Let me just wrap this up and thank you again for everything. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it on your social media channels and turn other folks onto it. I appreciate your support. Thanks very much to Will Hoge. Please check out Will's music at willhoge.com. Again, it's Will, Hoge. New record is Tiny Little Movies, and My American Dream is right behind that. Follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and give him a shout out and tell him you heard his interview and you dig his music. Most important, man, don't forget, especially nowadays, remember that happiness really is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I am out. Will, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, guys.